Hi, I'm going to talk about some of the issues related to outsourcing, remote team management, offshore team management. It's part of international team management. This is Joshi, and this is my video for QCfinance.in. Uh, a little bit about myself. I have done my undergrad in electrical engineering. Then I have done diplomas in financial risk and IT. Then I did an international MBA, and finally I'm working on the information system masters. When you look at international teams and international projects which involves offshore and onshore team, it's very important to understand that um, the criteria that might work in one geographical location and one culture is very different, and most of the time the problem and challenges are not just based on money or salaries or pricings, but there is some deep inherent ideas related to it. Uh, my job mostly has been in India, has been into outsourcing in different companies, different banks, and I worked in an outsourcing vendor kind of a job, and also in a captive job. So I have seen it closely, and I have several engagements with the HR and the onshore and the offshore managers to find out how things have been working. In my academics, in my masters, I also learned about international negotiation, and I had my class comprised of people from a dozen of or 2 dozen countries. So cultural aspect in terms of negotiation is also very important. Most of my experience has been into financial analytics project, mostly into quantitative finance and risk, but I've also done small projects in web development. Uh, the problem and challenges of outsourcing or creating an offshore team, or problems in international team, is my agenda for today. We're going to look at payment and pricing models. The whole idea here, when we look at offshore team, is many of the times we miss that it's more about long-term relationship and engagement rather than just doing a project here and there. Uh, Human resource overkill, it's very different in India and it's very different in the West. Some of the time I believe that Indian HR are doing an overkill and working on short metric that benefits them and not benefit the company. So the most important aspect when you are building an international team or you are outsourcing is understanding that a long-term relationship is essential, and it's such kind of a project only works when it goes into a long-term aspect. Uh, Developing relationship is also very critical to retain talent. Many of the times, some of the trainings and understandings that we get to a resource is much beyond the normal pricing that we can check about that. If it takes around 2 or 3 months generally to train somebody and get him rolling, and if he decides to leave, then not only hiring is difficult but also training is tricky. And not just that, if there are no mechanisms set for tech transfer, for knowledge transfer, if the tutorials are not built properly, if you are not working and using the new cloud technology, if you're not keeping files on the cloud and right sharing rights, then it becomes very complicated. So uh, most of the aspects here would work only on a long term. It becomes even more tricky because when you have somebody in your office and he's leaving versus somebody is leaving from an offshore team, both are different aspects. So you have to be careful about what you're looking from the offshore team, and you have to be careful that you use it in the right manner. For example, if you use an offshore team to develop tutorials and create a better knowledge transfer for attrition and in your onshore team, then it's a much better use, because in fact you are preparing your if you're preparing yourself for a critical loss that could happen on your onshore team, then that's a much better idea than moving a critical thing in offshore and then losing that person. So attrition is, I believe, the biggest risk. It's not even the price risk. Pricing is becoming more irrelevant, and the price difference is going to vanish, I believe, um, in the long term. Uh, as far as the goals that we are looking at, getting all of the team on the same page when we look at goal becomes very critical, because we want the last person in the team to understand the goal of the team and how things are moving. I used to see a lot of one-on-one meeting with not just my manager but two managers up, just in case they want to ask things like two things that I don't like, what could be done better, and things like that. So that engagement is quite critical. Many of the time, the offshore managers miss that aspect. One of the things that also creates a trouble in the long-term relationship is assuming that if you have somebody from the offshore team, he's able to manage that. Many of the time, it's not so simple. So when you are handling them, then you have to make sure that you get everybody on the board. The current situation that exists comprises of a lot of big bank and big force crowding placements and jobs in India. So two-thirds of the talent in the best colleges goes to these kind of a jobs. So it's quite interesting. Uh, the top engineers, the top financial analysts, the people who are best at the risk in India, they're not going to work in an Indian bank. The Indian bank actually get the last chunk, not just because of pricing, but also because of the work environment and the kind of global opportunities that multinationals have to offer. So if you think that it's easy to hire somebody, it's as difficult to hire the best and the bright in India as compared to the one in the US. In fact, sometimes it's easy to hire in the US if you are looking for something very critical, because you know that you have a high control over attrition and things like that. The mindset of stability and less risk taken is very inherent in India, and that makes it even worse for small companies. So, this presentation mostly I believe is for small companies and small projects who want to exploit the small who wants to have a small satellite team. If you are a small hedge fund or investment fund, then you should realize that you are in a place where if you train somebody, there is a very high chance that he may be poached away by big banks. I have friends who worked in outsource center of Deutsche Bank and Wachovia, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and they have a big presence of their offshore team in various geographical location around the world. So when you are a small team, you should understand and you should have a charter of agility on how you will be different from those big banks in terms of various aspects. Let me give an example. For example, when I used to see people working at an outsourcing center, say suppose of Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, the kind of payment and the flexibility in payment and the bonus link payment that they used to offer, like if somebody says stays 2 years, then a big bonus or things like that. It's very hard to do that in the big bank because they are too lethargic, which could be easily made in small hedge funds. Also in small hedge funds, you can get more engagement of even the last person there. So you have advantages of being small, but you should use these advantages to have a charter of agility on how you're going to make it count. If you look at the purchasing power parity, I generally ask everybody to use a multiplier of 3. So if you can find a resource which is 100k in US, you should expect the same cost to be like 35k in India. Now here something very tricky comes up here. Beside the salary, many times Indian outsourcing vendors would prefer somebody who has a wife and a kid and a family in the same city, because it makes it difficult to switch jobs or move to a different city. Like somebody could move to Bangalore, from Bangalore to Bombay to New Delhi, and that makes it hard. So they use stability as the biggest factor when they hire in the country, and it's not money. So when you look at the pricing, the mathematical rule is a multiplier of 3, but you should make sure that it's stable and less risky. So sometimes when I used to observe, somebody would not hire the best and the brightest for the job, because they think that it has more chances of iteration, but they would hire somebody from a tier 2 because they think that the guy is going to stick and is not going to leave very quickly. So in the current situation, and let me give you a little bit of background here. All the big banks and the big four have a big presence in India. They're using a multiplier of three. They're hiring, and they have a very transparent system with quantitative aspects linked to the interview process. Uh, as far as the forecast of the currency and the price arbitrage, INR was supposed to get stronger, but it did not due to various reasons. So uh, that went out of the train, and INR in fact depreciated. So still outsourcing in terms of just the price arbitrage exists. The original forecast, which turned out to be true, is mostly about outsourcing teams, which was expedited by the recession, because after the recession, many companies got an excuse which they used to take advantage of the price arbitrage. Uh, Now, when you look at what you should do when you are hiring, the most important part is understanding the culture, but not overdoing it, and understanding the pros and cons of each strategy. Whether you want to use price arbitrage, whether you want to send only stuff that is not critical, but stuff that helps you to manage your team onshore. Uh, the trust and pricing, these are like two critical aspects, because it's not always about the pricing, it's more about the trust. So, and bonus and rewarding, this is very different, where it's easy for somebody to move here and there, and the numbers are more magnified when somebody moves in different jobs. High salary to non-Ivy League. This has been one of the strategies where they would overprice somebody, and they would not give a standard salary just because it makes attrition difficult. So that was. But the HR mindset is to get the best guy in the cheapest price. Most of the time, I have seen that it does not work, because ultimately the arbitrage takes it over. So the HR focus should be to keep the person happy in his role and keep him satisfied. So not just focusing on cost arbitrage. So what I recommend is looking beyond cost effectiveness and in relationship building, uh, and a very clear aspect on the short term and the long term goal. Uh, this third point, I should have put it on the top, that knowledge transfer is the most critical aspect when you have an offshore team, because if somebody leaves or if something happens, you need to make sure that everything is cool. So extensive use of Google Docs and Google Excel and commenting and parallel coding and all this kind of stuff is very critical, which is already used in software engineering, web development, but find that less in analytics, especially risk analytics and financial analytics, where we are not using those kind of stuff like compiling on the cloud, parallel versions and things like that, and delegating various tasks to people and giving them flexibility in a way where they can get things done. That's one of the things that makes it easy for you to retain somebody. So that was about it. Thank you for listening.